So a funny thing happened today. Yes, the United States Capitol was breached by terrorists and rioters, all of whom support Donald Trump. I woke up this morning in a good mood. I had Georgia on my mind, Ossoff, Warnock. I'm thinking the world is a pretty good place. And then just a few hours later, we find out that white folks have gone crazy, at least the ones that support Donald Trump. Well, they were already crazy. They just manifested more craziness today. Listen, I got to break some news to you because I'm not sure if you heard it yet. And if you've been watching, Fox Soul all day, maybe you haven't heard this yet. So let me report this news. So Melania Trump's chief of staff has officially resigned. This happened minutes ago. Apparently, the terrorist breach of the Capitol was just a step too far for her. So she decided that she should resign. It's interesting because her chief of staff has long been a confidant and a friend, not just to Melania, but to the family. And so she's severing her ties. I find it interesting. Also, I'm not sure if you heard this at all yet today, but Twitter has suspended Donald Trump's account for 12 hours, and they have threatened to suspend it permanently. I'm rooting for permanently. In fact, I'm rooting for the fact that they should have suspended it a long time ago. It should not have come to this. Twitter, you don't get any kudos for doing what you should have done at least 3 years ago. But here they are, suspending his account. Listen, we've all heard about it today, right? So the Capitol was breached, and I think one of the things we're all trying to figure out, at least in the community, is number one, how did they get into the building? I used to work for the United States House of Representatives. I've been to the House many times, the Congress many times. I have been in the Speaker's office. I've been everywhere in that building. You can't just walk in that building. You cannot just walk into that building. There are guards everywhere. How did these people breach the building? How did they get into the building? And when I see security guards taking selfies with terrorists, it kind of tells me how they got in. Joy Reid said something on her program tonight. I wish I had thought of it, but I didn't. It comes from her. And that is that there's something about the police officers who protect the Capitol, who are supposed to do it, who saw something in themselves in the terrorists and the rioters. They saw something about themselves in those people, which made them treat them differently. We all know that if the terrorists today had been Black or Arab or brown, it would have been an entirely different story. In fact, before I bring on my guest, let me just tell you this. I watched today a woman having trouble walking down the stairs from the Capitol after the police were quietly and kindly moving people off the steps. She couldn't negotiate the steps. Now, first of all, if your ass can't walk down the stairs, then what are you doing rioting and trying to break into the Capitol? That's but that's another conversation. So she couldn't. She couldn't. And a police officer took her by the hand. This white woman took her by the hand and whatever the word is, nursed her down the stairs. Now, she's a part of the group that breached the Capitol, that invaded the capital of the United States, which hasn't been invaded in 200 years. And he helped her down the stairs. It's a slow-moving scandal. There's a real scandal in this. And the scandal isn't just what happened on the side of the terrorists and the protesters. It's also what happened with the criminal justice law enforcement response. Something's not right. I'm gonna leave it alone because I got Rodney Jacobs coming on tomorrow, and he's gonna open the show, and we're gonna spend 15 good minutes on this. And I'm gonna leave my thoughts for that until tomorrow. But I wanted you to know at least the things that I've given you tonight. And I want you to know one thing. You're not crazy. You're not crazy when you think there's a double standard in policing. You're not crazy when you think that white people refuse to see their own racism. And you're not wrong when you have a problem with it. In fact, you are right and you are righteous. Continue to do that work, because what we saw today is what happens when people are entitled and privileged and think that they own every damn thing, so much so rather that they feel that they can burn things down with impunity. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Anyway, let's do some mental. When I was thinking about this show today, I called T. Jones, executive producer, and I was like, we should change the show. She was like, no, keep the show the same. And now that I think about it, she was right. And let me tell you why. Because if we ever needed to talk to some mental health people, we need to talk to them tonight. Welcome to the show tonight, Jasmine Marie. Hey, Jasmine.
Hi, how are you, Dr. Shaw?
Ah, my dear sister, it is so good to see you. Thank you for coming on tonight.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
First, let me say you are absolutely radiant. Like
Thank
you
you.
were like giving off the best vibes ever.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No. It is absolutely our pleasure to have you. Thank you. I'm gonna put you to work tonight. All right, I'm gonna put you to work because
Okay.
there are a lot of Black folks watching, and if they like me, they've been watching the news. My producer said to me today that this whole thing was so impactful. She just had to lay down in the dark for like an hour,
Yeah.
just to
Yeah.
decompress. Listen. Normally, when I start these interviews, I have a whole series of questions about you, but
Mhm.
I'm not asking you nothing about you tonight. You are the one guest who's getting off the hook, at least for a little while, until the real me clicks back in. Here's what I want to ask you. Watching all of this shit, what do we do with all of this? I mean, we have literally been traumatized today watching television.
Yeah. I would say step away. We can re-traumatize ourselves by continuously watching these images that invoke the reality that we know we are not safe in our Black bodies, do not get treated with equality in our Black bodies. And having that message, replaying, whether you're listening to it or with those images being reminded of it and internally, it's so important for us to put those boundaries on the news that we consume to take care of ourselves, because that's part of the programming as well, is that constant reminder, of our space in the world, and ensuring that we can replace some of those messages with ones that affirm our identity and who we are.
You know what's interesting? When you were talking, I was thinking to myself, as you said something that sparked this thought in me, is it not the case that part of the trauma of racism and the trauma of bigotry happens to be making the victims of it watch the performance of privilege?
Yes. And often, fortunately, there are platforms now like Fox Soul where we can get information in a place that is safe for us to consume it. But oftentimes we are not owners of the mass media. So the images that are played over and over and over do not have our trauma and well-being in mind. So it's important for us to take ownership of our mental health and know when to shut it down, when to walk away, and it doesn't mean that we're not engaged citizens to take care of ourselves. We can consume the news we need in that moment and then step away.
Yes, but Jasmine, it's so hard.
It's addictive.
It's so hard. Is that what it is? Am I addicted? Talk to me, Jasmine. Help me. Talk me through this.
There is such a thing as, the emotional states that we live in that we're used to, right? If we're always used to being in a heightened sense, and most Black people, because of racism, and the beautiful thing about the work that was done with the American Medical Association was classifying racism as a public health issue. That's huge for researchers, for policymakers. We have chronic stress that has become normalized. We are constantly existing with high adrenal glands, our high cortisol levels, and that becomes our norm. So being in that heightened state is, it's something that we can unconsciously seek. So when we're looking for those news bits or, that are heightening and feeding that sensation that we're used to, it can be like a cycle, and it's not something I feel like we should feel ashamed of in our unlearning, because that's a product of our environment, right? As we become aware, we can then do the work to say, okay, I know I'm in a heightened state, and I recognize this. What can I do to ensure that I'm taking care of my nervous system and tuning out of the sources that feed me into that state?
No, I think you're right, here's what I'm trying to formulate or to create as a response to this, and I want your professional opinion about this, and that is when we watch the events of today, that maybe the perspective Black folks ought to take towards it should be one as observers, right? That we are observing the dysfunction that is normally directed at us that dysfunction is playing itself out as white folks deal with other white folks. That we dispassionately observe it because it's not new information to us. We
Right.
already
It's
knew that
yeah.
racism makes you out of your mind.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think for us, it's more of the world seeing what we already knew.
That's it. That's it. That's it. Jasmine, that's it.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And that, so yeah, this is good. This is good. So what happened today was the world got access to private knowledge that we had to live with for 400 years.
Yes.
That being that most people who claim to be patriotic and claim to love democracy and claim to love law and order, wait for it, claim to love, the criminal justice system, that those commitments only go so far as their interests. They're not principled at all. We already knew that. And now the world got to see it in glaring terms today.
Absolutely. I equate our experience as Black people and what we, know intuitively. A lot of people outside of our community need that evidence, so to speak, something that we can feel when we walk into situations and we know we're not welcome. Right. And when we get into like my aspect of work where it is more intuitive and dealing with the body, and our body knows things, and us as a people knowing certain truths that when we talk about it, it doesn't look like it. Well, if it doesn't look like racism used to, it's hard. We go through that narrative. And I think what we're seeing is the opportunity for allies and other people who have not woken up to see the physical manifestation of it. So we don't have to keep talking about it. So we don't have to keep, discussing our plight.
Yeah, no, it is. I'm a firm believer, Jasmine, that life, the universe, God, sometimes allows things to happen so that they can speak to us and tap us on the shoulder and remind us of what's really going on. And I think today's events, all of the craziness of it, all of just the horrible ways by which those people gathered and did what they did, it is a tap on the shoulder to this nation that if you do not get your house in order, the kind of corrosive hatred and violence and commitment to greed and egoism and selfishness will destroy you. You are on the brink of something devastating. And this is the beginning of the sign. I want to ask you a different question before I go to my first break. And that is for the members of the House of Representatives and the Senate who were trapped in that building, they experienced trauma today, didn't they?
Absolutely. That's a traumatic situation. Absolutely.
What would be your advice to them? Like, let's say one of them is watching. What's your advice?
I see how I automatically didn't inhale just thinking about.
Yeah.
I would offer my work is dealing with trauma in a somatic or healing from the body perspective, as trauma doesn't get stored in our mind, but our bodies. That's why we can think of a situation and our body have a response, right? So finding a type of tool, a somatic healing tool that you can get into to help, alleviate. I'm just like, that is just so wild just thinking about it. Alleviate your experience, but also talk therapy is great. There's going to express what you went through, and in your expressing of what you've gone through today, you can recognize different areas in the body where you feel that trauma and fear in the nervous system. And so coupling traditional talk therapy with a kind of somatic healing tool like breath work, and there's plenty of others, would be my suggestion.
Listen, I think you're absolutely right. And when we come back, I'm about to take a break. When we come back, I want to delve into that. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about Black girls breathing and focus in on your work, and give it the time and the conversation it deserves. I think before I throw through this break, I think that every member of the House of Representatives, every senator should get counseling after today. They should all be forced or encouraged to talk to someone And I also think that Mike Pence should invoke the 25th Amendment and get rid of Donald Trump, because this is not going to stop. It's only going to get worse. I'm breathing, though. We'll be right back. Watch me breathe.